Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video. Today we are talking about the best books that I have read so far in 2025. 2025 was honestly off to a bit of a rough start for me in terms of life and life things, and of course that affected my reading, but things have really picked up in the last few months. And I'm not talking so much about the amount I'm reading, but more so the quality, the ability for me to focus on what I'm reading, just my reading life in general. And I'm really happy with how things are, I guess, turning out. The last couple months in particular have been amazing, and I just recently uploaded my May and June reading wrap up, and for those who have seen it, you would have seen just how many wonderful books I read in those 2 months, and I'm so grateful, and I'm just hopeful that the rest of the year will be very similar. And it's been a good reading year. The main thing is that I'm enjoying what I'm reading, and I'm feeling a lot less pressure to read a certain amount of books, to read like certain people. I'm feeling a lot less of the fear of missing out, which was a huge goal of mine. And speaking of goals, I will be uploading a kind of catch up, just looking at my reading goals that I shared in December for this year and how I'm doing with those. So look out for that video. It will be coming out probably in the next few days. But this video, I just wanted to share the books that have been highlights of the year so far. I will share all the books from January to June that are definitely favorites, and I need to talk about them. So that's what this video is. And then of course, at the end of the year, we will, I guess, wrap up the entire reading year, look at all my favorites. I guess more so the books from July to December as well. But we're just gonna dive right in, and I do have it split up by month. So we'll go from January to June, and then within each month, I have honorable mentions and favorites. I think with the exception of 1 month where I don't have any honorable mentions. But we're gonna get started with January. I'll just quickly mention the honorable mentions and then focus more on my favorite reads of the month. And I did want to quickly mention for honorable mentions, some of them are 4 stars, some are 4.5 stars. Not all of the 4 and 4.5 stars made it to my honorable mentions list. These are books that I feel are books I would reread. They're more memorable than, say, some of the other 4-star reads. They're books that really stuck out to me in a way that some of the other 4-star reads did not. And the list just makes sense to me. All the books that I have listed, it just makes sense that they are on my top list. And I do have 30 books to share, which is more than half of what I've read from January to June. So I am really happy with the quality of books I'm reading this year. But for January, we have 3 honorable mentions, and we will start off with The Princess, which is a long epic poem from this collection of Tennyson's major works. And The Princess is a really interesting epic poem. It's a story within a story, and we have this family gathered for a summer feast just out on their property, and a friend is visiting, and they ask the friend to share a story. And so he tells the story of a princess in this faraway land. It's very fantastical, and she has basically forsworn all contact with males, with men. And she starts a university where they only allow women. And it's really interesting. It brings up some really interesting questions and themes, and you kind of wonder what Tennyson's perspective was on the things he was exploring, because it's not very clear. But it is such a beautifully written narrative poem, and one that I am very excited to reread in the future. I underlined and highlighted so many beautiful passages. I really loved it, and I thought it was very interesting, very fairy tale-like in terms of the story itself. So would highly recommend The Princess as a narrative poem, and it was a lot less intimidating to read than I was expecting, so had to mention that one as an honorable mention. The next honorable mention is The Appeal by Janice Hallett, and this is a very interesting epistolary mystery. So I did read this for the Epistolary January readathon that I was co-hosting in the month of January. It's a very unique mystery and just story in general, and it doesn't start off with a murder as a lot of mysteries do. In this one, there is a murder that occurs, but it happens much later in the story. This one is much more a character study, and you're learning about all of these characters through their emails to each other. And it may not sound interesting, but I could not put this book down, and I know many readers felt the same. It is just so engrossing. We have this group of amateur, I guess, actors who kind of put on these theater performances, and the director's granddaughter is diagnosed with this rare form of cancer, and so he asks for this group group to help raise money, and they need a lot of money to get this experimental drug that they can only get from overseas. And I forgot to mention, this is set in the UK, so they're trying to get this medication from North America, and things are not quite as they seem. There's so much underlying tension. Some of the characters, they just feel so sinister. Some of them are outright terrible. Others, it's just so good. It's so good. I gave this one, I believe, 4 stars. I had a lot of fun reading it, and I definitely want to try more from this author. I thought this was so unique and definitely a page turner, even though with it being epistolary and told through emails, it's not like it was full of action where you're constantly turning the page because of the plot, but I still couldn't stop reading. It was so good. So good, and so I had to mention this one as well. And then the third honorable mention for January is The Last Chronicle of Barset by Anthony Trollope. And this is the 6th and final novel in the Barsetshire series. There's not much I can say about it just because it is the final novel. And even though it wasn't my favorite in the series, it still was so impactful, and I definitely felt very choked up finishing this book. Trollope just beautifully brought all the characters' stories to a close in this book. He introduced many different characters throughout the series, and we kind of get to see, I guess, the conclusion of everyone's little part to play in the entire series. We get to see Mr. Harding again from The Warden, and we do see Dr. Thorne and his wife. We see more of Lily Dale and Johnny Eames, who are 2 of my favorite characters. We have the Grantleys and the Proudies, and just so many amazing characters that are brought to life. And in this story, we are focused more on the story of Josiah Crawley, who is basically accused of stealing a check. And he's a very proud man, not very wealthy, and so his family's kind of at risk of ruin. And it's quite an intense story. I really enjoyed this one, and I definitely thought it was a great read, so had to mention this one as well. And now for my 3 favorite reads, the 5-star reads of January. We have The Young Stepmother by Charlotte Mary Young, and this book was just beautiful. Charlotte Mary Young is a very special and just wonderful writer, and more people need to read her. More people who love Victorian literature, especially people who love domestic fiction. You need to read this author. She is wonderful. I read her book, The Heir of Redcliffe, last year, and that is the book famously known by readers, astute readers of Little Women. And there's a specific scene where Jo is weeping over this book, The Heir of Redcliffe, and that book was just amazing. It was the first book I read by this author, and it will not be the last. I have just continued to fall in love with her writing. And so in January, I read The Young Stepmother with a group of lovely people, and we all loved it. And we all gave it 5 stars, I believe. And I just loved it so much. Like I said, it is a domestic story. It is very cozy. And we have this woman named Albinia who, she marries this man who has young children. Their mother had passed away many years before. And so she kind of is embracing her new role as a stepmother and a young wife. And she is very much the type of person who always has like a spring in her step. She's just optimistic and willing to meet challenges as they come. And she is just such a wonderful stepmother to these children, but of course there are so many obstacles that she faces. And what really fascinated me was the way that Charlotte Mary Young explored depression and mental health in the story. As one of the daughters in particular, one of the stepdaughters, she really does struggle, and just the complexities of these characters, it's just wonderful. And it explores grief. It has some very mundane, everyday types of goings on that are described, but I just couldn't get enough of it. It was so beautiful. I really loved that Albinia loved her stepchildren just as much as her own biological children once she does have them. And it was just such a beautiful story. I loved it so much, and I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks after finishing it. It was amazing. This next book I'm not going to talk about a lot because I have talked about this series so much, and for any of you who watch my videos, you've heard me yap on and on about this series, and probably other booktubers as well. But I also read volume 3 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon series, and I just adore this series so much. I will say it is a series completely told in journal entries. Emma M. Lyon is a funny, spunky Victorian young lady, and she's just trying to live her life, but it seems that every little thing she does is sabotaged by her family, her extended family, and it is hilarious. This entire series is hilarious, and I loved volume 3 so much, and I can't wait to continue reading. I actually do have volume 4 to talk about, but that is later on in this video. But either way, this series is just fantastic. And the final book that I have to talk about for January is Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. This is the only book I've read so far by Edith Wharton, but it will not be the last. Wow. This book packed a punch. I flew through it. It is a very short story, a very short novel, probably more novella length, but I was just enamored and tabbed and highlighted and underlined, and wow, I just don't even know what to say. Our narrator is an unnamed character. He meets our main character, Ethan Frome, and learns about his story. And his story is quite tragic. Ethan is quite unlikable, but at the same time, it's hard not to feel sorry for him because of what he goes through, but at the same time, consequences. And it's intense. It's so intense. And I went from just being absolutely enamored by the writing and the descriptions of the bleak winter scenery, and from that to, oh my goodness, I can't with these characters. They are insufferable. They are awful. Everything is so depressing and pessimistic. On Goodreads, I said I don't know how to review a book like this. I felt like my emotions were being played with, but it was so well written and I couldn't put it down, and I still think about it. And it's one that I will reread. I know I will reread it, and I'm excited to. And even if it's just for the writing is unreal. It is stunning. It is stunning. Every single word has a place here. It is very, very simple. It's not flowery, and it doesn't waste a single word, but wow. I don't know what else to say. It's not for the type of reader that needs fluffy sunshine, that kind of thing. It's not that at all. It's depressing. The only ray of light comes from one character named Maddie, but that doesn't last very long. So anyways, that is Ethan Frome. Such a powerful book. In February, I didn't read very much, so I don't have any honorable mentions, but I do have 2 books that I wanted to mention as favorites, keeping in mind they are both rereads. So these are books I have read before and then reread them in February, and I loved my reread so much for both of them. And actually, for the both of them, my ratings went up. So the first time that I read Dracula, I gave it, I think, 4.5 stars. This time around, it was a 5-star read, mainly because I took my time with it. I really paid attention to what I was reading. I feel like February was the month where I really became a lot more intentional with trying to be more analytical, even though I still struggle with that. But this book was fantastic. Wow. Dracula is the classic vampire story that everyone has heard of, many people have read, and many people love. And I just did not realize how deep it was until reading it, listening to the Literary Life podcast episodes on the book, and underlining and taking notes. And I'm just amazed. And I loved these characters so much. Jonathan Harker and Mina and Lucy and Van Helsing. I love these characters, and I couldn't stop reading this. I couldn't put it down. I want to start rereading it right now. Like it is just fantastic, and I know this is going to be a favorite of all time for the rest of my life here on earth. I loved this book so much. As someone who does not like to be scared, I do not like horror. I do not like anything of that realm. I don't even like vampires. Like I really, really do not like vampires. I have not read Twilight. I have no interest in that kind of creature and just all of that. It's just not for me, but this book is for me. I adored it. And then I also read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and this was a book that I first read a few years ago, and it was the book by Jane Austen that I remembered the least about, because the first time I read it, I was still very, very new to classics. I still consider myself very new to classics, but I mean new, like brand spanking new. It was, the early part of COVID. I was just getting into classics, and I had read Pride and Prejudice, and I'm not sure if this was the second or third Jane Austen book I read, but either way, I am so glad I reread it. There was so much that I didn't remember, and it was just such a beautiful story, and I really, really fell in love with Eleanor and Marianne at this time around, and especially with Colonel Brandon. He is just such a gentle soul, and he's so steadfast, and I just loved this book. I love the sister relationships. I love the exploration of siblings, not just with Eleanor and Marianne, but with several other sibling pairs in this book, and I just loved it. I love this so much. I love Jane Austen. I couldn't get enough of this read. It's beautiful. Moving on. I'm going to try to pick up the pace because we have quite a few more books to get through. But next up is March, and I have 2 honorable mentions to share. First up is A Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie, and while this isn't an all-time favorite Agatha Christie, it was one that kind of brought me out of what I would call an Agatha Christie slump. For the last, I would say, year and a half, I haven't been reading very many great Agatha Christie books. I've been reading a lot of mediocre kind of Agatha Christie stories I'm not really invested in. I'm not feeling as engaged when I read them, but this one was so lovely. It felt a lot more cozy, and it gave the English countryside ambience that I love, and there is a dog that plays a very big part in the story, and his name is Bob too. I still remember Bob. In this one, we have a woman who believes that her life is in danger. She is an older woman, and she has a lot of money that her family is set to inherit. I believe a niece and nephew, if I'm not mistaken. And she thinks that something is going to happen to her because she slipped and fell down the stairs, did not think it was an accident. She thinks that it was set up to hurt her. And so she writes a letter to Hercule Poirot without very many details, but basically asking him to come and help her out, investigate, whatever. But he doesn't get the letter until 2 months later, which is very mysterious. And then he does go to her house, but she is already dead. And was it an accident? Was it murder? This book is so good. Highly recommend. I did say there are 2 honorable mentions, but I honestly feel like this other one deserves to be in the favorites category. I really, really loved this book, and that is Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy by Anne Boyd Ryu. This was such a fantastic nonfiction book. I loved it so much. It is really a love letter to Little Women. It is not a biography about Louisa May Alcott, although there are biographical parts to the story, but it is really a love letter to Little Women and how it has influenced the generation since it was written, and it's just so good. I loved it so much. I think the only reason it didn't quite make it to 5 stars was just because the last little bit that dealt more with modern culture and modern perceptions of Little Women. I didn't agree with everything the author said, which is fine. I don't expect to, but I just struggled a bit with some of the things that were written. But either way, as a whole, this is a must read. If you love Little Women, if you love Louisa May Alcott, must read. So, so good. And then the other favorite is definitely Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This is a reread as well. I love this book. I love the Little House on the Prairie books. I love the TV series. I love everything about these characters, these real people, and their tenacity and the hard work that, like, I can't even fathom living the way that they lived. And even Caroline Ingalls, who grew up in the East, she grew up in, I guess, more affluent circumstances. She gives up a lot of comfort to marry Charles and start a family with him and become pioneers and, you know, move to new places. And it just blows my mind. Every time I read these books, the work that went into surviving. The writing is also just so, so cozy. And I am obsessed with the illustrations by Garth Williams, the absolute coziest of illustrations. And just everything about this series, it's a warm hug. I just love it so much. This will always be a favorite. Moving on to April, we have a few honorable mentions here as well. The first one is Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Ann Jacobs. This was such an interesting memoir. It was very, very difficult to read. It was gut-wrenching, and I didn't give it an official star rating. I don't feel like I could, but wow, this story. This woman is just amazing. I have so much respect for her and what she went through. But it is basically her story. She gives herself and all the other people in the story fictional names, and she tells her story of her life as a slave from her childhood to freedom, basically. And as a child, it's interesting because she was treated pretty well, all things considered, and her grandmother, who was also a slave, was actually well respected in their community, even by the people who owned her. And I can't remember if her grandmother was granted her freedom, but either way, very well respected woman. And while her childhood was not as bad as it could have been, things got a lot harder once she had to move into another home. And the atrocities, the despicable, absolute garbage human beings that she had to live with. It's the autobiography of a slave. It's going to be a hard read, but it is so, so beautiful. And the ending of the story, just highly recommend this one if you have not read it. It was fantastic. In April, I was definitely inspired to read Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, as well as this next book, because of reading Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy in March. I was kind of in a Little Women Civil War kind of frame of mind, if you will. And I also read March by Geraldine Brooks. So those 3 books were all read very close together. And this book was also fantastic. It's basically Mr. March's story. He doesn't really play a part in the events of Little Women, but this is his story as an army chaplain. We do get a bit of his young adulthood and things that he may have experienced, and then his time during the Civil War. And it's quite gruesome. It is very hard-hitting. It's not a cozy story like Little Women at all. But if you're interested in Mr. March and his story and what could have been, in essence, what Mr. March could have been doing while his family was at home and he was away kind of, doing his duty. And what I found really interesting was the author actually took a lot of inspiration from Louisa May Alcott's father, Bronson. He was a very, very interesting man. And so this is kind of like the melding of the two, and I loved it. Like I said, it is gruesome and it has some really, really difficult scenes to read, and it's hard hitting, but so, so impactful. And I still think about it to this day. So I would also recommend this one. And the last honorable mention for April is The Muse of Maiden Lane by Mimi Matthews. This was so, so wonderful. It is my second favorite book out of the Bells of London series. There are 4 books in the series. The third was my absolute favorite, and I just adored it. And this one was a close second. I really, really enjoyed this one, and I found the, I guess, quieter romance to be just very, very sweet. And I loved the exploration into art and our main male love interest. He is in a wheelchair, so there's that disability representation. And our female main character has a, I don't know, I guess some sort of condition where her hair turned prematurely gray. So they are both dealing with their own insecurities, their own kind of struggles to fit into Victorian society, and it is such a sweet story. Very, very different from the first 2. It's slower paced and it's not a whirlwind romance. It's very gentle, but I really loved it for what it was, and I really loved the introduction to the world of art that the author explored through Teddy, who was the male love interest. I just really, really enjoyed this one. So this is definitely another honorable mention. And then I have 2 top reads of April that I want to share. The first one is The Two Princesses of Bomar by Gail Carson Levine. And this is also a reread. I feel like I had a lot of rereads this first half of the year, which is great, and I've enjoyed all of them. And this one is a fairy tale. It is a story of 2 sisters who are very, very different. One is very meek and shy and withdrawn, and the other one is very courageous and outgoing, and the one that people definitely admire more. But there is this plague that is ravaging the kingdom, and the more brave and adventurous of the sisters falls ill, and it is up to the more fearful of the sisters to save them and find a cure. And she goes on this adventure, and it is so, so fun and just such a fun and cozy fantasy. I love these types of medieval feeling fantasy stories, very fairy tale, almost like a Disney movie. I just enjoyed this one so much and was so happy to reread it. I had such a great time. My favorite read of April is definitely Jane of Lantern Hill by Ella Montgomery. This book, oh my goodness. It is up there. I think it's tied with Anne for second favorite. The reason I say that is because The Blue Castle is, I think it's my favorite. The Blue Castle's my favorite, and then Anne with Jane of Lantern Hill. I can't rank them. They are all wonderful for different reasons. But Jane is one of my favorite characters. She just comes out of her cocoon like a butterfly when she is given the opportunity to leave her stifling home in Toronto. She lives with her grandmother and her mother. Her mother is married, but is estranged from her husband, and Jane really knows nothing about her father until he asks for her to come and spend the summer with him. And it is so beautiful. I love this story. I tabbed it up to bits. It is everything, and the writing is everything, and Ellen Montgomery, she tugs at my heartstrings like no other author. This is such a perfect summer read, so if you haven't read it, I highly recommend reading it over the summer. It is just everything. I loved this so much. Okay, moving on. Now we're getting into May, and this is where the list really grows. I have one honorable mention and then several favorites, and I believe it's the same with June. I have a few honorable mentions and then several books that have made it to my favorites of the year list because I have been following my mood. I've been reading what I want to read and books that I think I will love, and I'm so happy with how that's gone. But for May, the honorable mention is The Vanderbeekers and the Hidden Garden by Karina Jan Glaser. And this is the second book in the Vanderbeekers series and one that I enjoyed so much. If you don't know anything about this series, it is about the Vanderbeeker children. It's middle grade, and they are 5 siblings that live in Harlem, and they live in this brownstone apartment. They have the coziest of living arrangements with neighbors that they just love so much, and the neighbors love them, and it is just so precious. And in this book, one of their neighbors unfortunately has a stroke, and to give him something to look forward to when coming home from the hospital, which is what they're hoping for, they decide to take this plot of land that is just destroyed and turn it into a garden. And it is the most heartwarming and wholesome story, and it is just so full of spring descriptions, and I loved it so much. This one was so beautiful. Would highly recommend it. But moving on to my favorites of May, we have several. And I'm just gonna say now, I'm gonna go through these pretty quick because I did talk a lot about these books in my wrap up. So I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about them or we'll be here for a lot longer. But the first one that I wanted to mention is Dark Fire by C.J. Sansom. This is the second book in a mystery series set in the Tudor era. It has Matthew Shardlake as its main character, and he is a lawyer and he solves mysteries, and it is so fantastic. It is just so atmospheric and so well written. One of the characters is also Thomas Cromwell, and even though I know very little about the Tudor period and all of that, it doesn't feel daunting reading this series. It's a lot less intimidating than I was expecting. So this one was a 5-star read. I loved it so much, and I am so excited to read book 3. So that is Dark Fire. We also have one of my favorite Agatha Christie novels. We have Sad Cypress. This one was so great. It is partially set in a village, an English countryside village, and also in a courtroom. So we have this murder trial that's going on where this woman is accused of murdering another woman who she believed was kind of trying to get her fiance. And it is wild. The layers to the story are wild, and it is just so great. Would highly recommend this one as well. It's one of my favorite Agatha Christie stories. I really like that Poirot kind of just takes a step back once he's called in to help with this murder trial, and he just kind of lets things, you know, take their course, and then things reveal themselves, and it's just so good. Would highly recommend. I also really loved Drake Hall, which is book 2 in the Secrets of Ormdale series by Christina Bear. This is a cozy series set in the Victorian era, a cozy fantasy series with dragons, and it is so much fun. Our main character Edith in the first book learns that she has some abilities when it comes to dragons, some magical abilities, and she learns about the dragon lore and her family history and how everything is related to the court of Elizabeth I, and it is just so much fun. This book in particular had a lot of references to the Renaissance period and Elizabeth and her court and everything, and it was just so good. So I had to mention this one as well. Such a favorite. Earlier in the video, I mentioned Emma M. Lyon and that I would be bringing up volume 4 as well. And I have nothing to say about this other than it is fantastic. This entire series is fantastic. They are wonderful, and each book is wonderful. And this also got 5 stars, and it's a favorite. What else can I say? And my absolute favorite book that I finished in May was Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have already sung this book's praises multiple times in multiple videos. I have a whole dedicated book review for it, more like a book gush. I adored this book so much. It is an all-time favorite book. I just can't get enough of it. Molly is one of my favorite characters ever. This book is fantastic. If you love cozy domestic Victorian books with a lot of depth, this is a must read. And finally, we have the month of June, in which I read so many 4.5 and 5-star reads and just had the best reading month. And the first honorable mention is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is also a reread. I read this for the first time, I believe 3 or 4 years ago, and just fell in love with the entire series. As someone who's not huge into fantasy, I loved this series. I love fairy tale retellings, and this is obviously a retelling of Cinderella with a character who is a cyborg, and it is set in the future, so like a futuristic world, and it is just so great. I am currently reading the second book in the series, or rereading it, which is Scarlet, and then we'll continue throughout the rest of the summer, but had to mention this one. It's so great. Another honorable mention, we have Chasing Shadows by Lynn Austen, and this is a World War II historical fiction, and definitely one of my favorite World War II stories of all time. This was so beautiful. It is a slower, sweeping story of motherhood and coming of age and families being separated, and it's set in the Netherlands and definitely has some vibes of The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. And it is just so powerful, and I felt very, very deeply reading this story. Such a great World War II historical fiction, would highly recommend. And the third honorable mention is Edenbrooke by Julianne Donaldson, and this one I really, really enjoyed. It is a very sweet and cozy Regency romance, and it's just sweetness and wholesomeness, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm so excited to read more from this author. I see that she hasn't written very much, and that makes me very sad. I hope she writes some more Regency era stories, because this one was great. It wasn't an all-time favorite. I do need a little more of other things in romances for them to be favorites. If not, like next level wit and character studies and things like that, the way Jane Austen writes, then at the very least, really, really great humor the way Georgette Hare writes. Like, I'm very, very picky with romances, but I did really enjoy this one. Definitely an honorable mention, and definitely one that I would reread in the future. I thought it was great. But moving on to my favorite reads of June, which I did talk a lot about in my wrap-up as well, so I'm going to try to go through these quickly. First up is Castle of the Winds by Christina Bear, the third book in the Secrets of Ormdale series. And this one just continues from right where the second book left off. I can't really say anything about the plot, just because the plot builds on itself, and I just loved this one. It is set in Wales, so I loved the descriptions of the Welsh mountains and forests, and it felt very Arthurian and just magic. It is pure magic, and we learn about Welsh mythology and lore and everything, and it is just wonderful. Such a great book. Another favorite is definitely Mrs. Tim of the Regiment by D.E. Stevenson. This is only my second D.E. Stevenson book. I have also read Miss Bunkle's book, and I did enjoy that one, but I think I just wasn't in the right mood for it when I did read it, so I have to reread it at some point. But this one, I fell in love. Oh my gosh. If this is how D.E. Stevenson writes her nature descriptions and character interactions and just the descriptions of Scotland, I need more. I need more. She is going to be a favorite author. I already know it. And I don't feel like it's fair to say that, because I've only read 2 of her books, and only one of the 2 is one that I actually remember what really happened. I need to read more. But wow, this book was fantastic. Oh my gosh. Every time I've listened to people talk about D.E. Stevenson, I'm like, why haven't I read more? Why am I holding off on reading more of her books? And I have to say, if it wasn't for Jacqueline, one of my lovely friends and someone who always comments on my videos, and Jacqueline, you mean so much to me. Thank you so much for being here. But if it wasn't for Jacqueline, she sent me books 2 and 3 in this series because she had extra copies. If it wasn't for that, I probably would not have picked this book up this year. Very, very likely that I would not have read a single D.E. Stevenson book this year. So I really owe that to you, Jacqueline. Thank you. This book was everything to me. So that is Mrs. Tim of the Regiment. And of course, I have more thoughts to share about the actual story in my June wrap-up. And then I also read a Shakespeare play that I did read for the first time in high school, but I remembered zero. Like, I remembered nothing except for a few character names. And I read it at a time where I didn't even really love reading. I read like some Christian fiction just kind of to pass the time. My reading life didn't really pick up until after COVID, but I reread A Midsummer Night's Dream and fell in love. This play will forever be one of my favorite plays, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays ever, of all time. I wouldn't be surprised if it stays within my top 5. I just adored it. I adored how just stupidly funny it was. It was so silly and just over the top, but also had some really, really interesting themes. And every time I think about Bottom, the man that is transformed into a donkey, I crack up because he's so funny. And there's a play within a play. That play was ridiculous, hilarious. I love this play so much. This book is just such a fantastical and wild, wild fairy tale of a play. And Shakespeare was very, very strongly influenced by Ovid's Metamorphoses when writing this play. And I haven't read that yet, so I really need to. But I just loved learning about, I guess, the Greek myth behind a lot of the characters and the things going on in the play. This edition surprisingly had really, really great notes at the back. I usually go for the No Fear Shakespeare or the Folger editions, but this one I found at a used bookstore and I just grabbed it. And the introduction was also so great. And a lot of the introduction, the things brought up were very similar to what was discussed by the hosts of the Literary Life podcast when they discussed this play. And I loved their episodes on it as well. So this is such a great play. Would highly recommend. It's a great place to start with Shakespeare. It's quite easy to read compared to his other ones as well. I also read The Silver Chair from this massive collection, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. It is the second last book chronologically in the Chronicles of Narnia. And while I wouldn't have said the Chronicles of Narnia is a favorite series, I just loved The Silver Chair so much. And I did really, really love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And after continuing on with the rest of the books, The Magician's Nephew, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Prince Caspian, etc., I thought that maybe The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was just kind of a solitary favorite, if you will, and that the series itself wouldn't really be the series that I just love, the way that so many other readers love. Like, this is canon for so many people. This series brings so many readers joy and has transformed so many readers' lives. And I just wasn't really getting that feeling the way that I've seen other people, similarly to how people feel about The Lord of the Rings. And that's another series I need to read. I have read The Fellowship, but need to reread it and then read the entire series. But anyways, I read The Silver Chair and just fell in love. And so now I'm really curious, after still needing to read The Last Battle. Once I've read The Last Battle, I'm going to reread these books in publication order because I read these in chronological order, and I'm wondering if reading in publication order will help me, I guess, have a different experience. Or maybe I just wasn't in the mood when I read the other books. I don't know. I am of the opinion that every time you read a book, it's a different version of you that's reading that book. So I feel like if I reread these books, I think I will see them differently. I will see them under a different light. But anyways, yada yada. I loved The Silver Chair so much. I gave it 5 stars. It was fantastic, and I am very excited to read the last book. And last, but certainly not least, we have Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Wow. Wow, wow. I did mention in my June wrap-up that I want to film, or am planning to film, a video dedicated just to this book. And I still want to do that. And I am hopeful that the video will come out in July. That is my goal. But I just feel so intimidated, not by the book, but by what I could possibly say. I feel like everything there is to say about this book has already been said. There are so many fantastic reviews out there. And so when I do film the video, it'll be much less of a review and much more of a, this is how I felt reading the book. This was my experience reading the book. And I will say, the majority of the time, I felt a lot of negative feelings. But I don't see that as a bad thing, and I don't see that as a reason to give a book less than 5 stars if it's that impactful. So for me, even though I detested Scarlet and I detested the events of the book, and I felt so much anger reading about and reading how slaves were talked about. And it was a lot. It was a lot to read. It was a lot to take in. It was very, very intense, and I felt very like a heavy weight on my soul when I finished it. But I'm so glad that I did. Books like this are very, very important to me. Books that make me feel a lot, and books that explore the worst and the best of humanity. But it was just done so effectively in this book. And yeah, I'm just gonna save the rest of my thoughts for another video. But anyways, that is Gone with the Wind. I wouldn't say it's my favorite read of June. That would probably be Mrs. Tim of the Regiment, maybe, I'm not sure. But it's definitely the most emotionally engaging, I would say. But anyways, fantastic book. And that is the last book that I needed to talk about on my very long list of favorite reads of 2025 from January to June. Thank you so much if you've stuck around to the end of this video. Thank you all for watching, and I would also love to know what your favorite reads have been of the year so far. You can leave as many as you want in the comments below. Let me know whether it's a top 3, top 5, top 10, top 30. Let me know what books have made it to your favorites list, and I would just love to continue talking in the comments below. And if any of the books I've mentioned were also books you read and you had similar thoughts, or even if you had different thoughts, different experiences reading them, please do let me know in the comments. But friends, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. It means the world to me, but I will see you in my next video. Bye.